let's talk about the protocols a little bit more. Oh, I got a giant bubble over my face there. That's interesting. We're going to talk specifically about the TCP/IP protocol stack or protocol suite. We'll talk about those terms in a minute. First of all, what in the world do we mean by protocol? Well, according to Webster, protocol is a set of conventions governing the treatment and especially the formatting of data in an electronic communications system. So, in other words, the rules by which we communicate. In the same way, if you think about a language, for example, if the English language is one protocol and the Spanish language is another protocol, you and I both have to speak the same language in order for us to communicate. So we have to follow the rules of English language or the Spanish language or the German language. If we don't follow those rules, if I speak in English and you listen and you only know German, right, then there's no communication taking place. So here's an analogy. I'm writing a letter. If I'm writing a letter, I'm using lots of different protocols. I'm using a language protocol. Which language am I writing in? I'm using a certain format. Right? I put the date at the top, then the salutation, the body of the letter, the valediction, which is sincerely or whatever it is, and then my name. So I'm using a certain format protocol. I'm using an addressing protocol, and put the return address up in the corner and the to address down there in the middle somewhere. I have to put a stamp in a certain place for the post office. I have a certain way of mailing it. I have to drop it off either in my mailbox at home or at the post office, put the flag up if it's at home. Then they have protocols that they go through and how they cancel it and process it. How do they physically move it? They have different protocols that they can choose from. They can send it by truck, they can send it by train, they can send it by carrier pigeon for all I know, and so on. So those are the various protocols that they have. And you notice in some cases there are choices of protocols depending on how they want to send it. Is it airmail? Is it land? And so on. Now, these protocols at different layers of the OSI model, these protocols are different for each different layer, but they do have to be compatible with and interact with the ones next to them. So, for example, in this slide you see that the network, the protocol in the network layer has to be compatible with and talk the same language as the protocols used in the transport layer. And also it has to be compatible with those in the data link layer and so on. Now, if I get outside of this little triad here, I don't care anymore. So, for example, the protocols used to physically send it, the ones and zeros and electrical signals or radio signals, have nothing whatsoever to do with how it's written up here. I could care less what protocol I use to create the content. All I care about down here is being able to interact with the data link layer and then the protocol itself down here. And that's a very important point, that we only talk to the layer next door, and they have to be compatible with the layer next door. Because of this interaction, because each layer, the protocols at each layer have to be able to talk to and speak the same language or compatible language with the protocols next door, that means there have to be a set of compatible protocols. And so we call that entire set the protocol stack or a protocol suite. The two terms are interchangeable. So here are a few of them. In the past, before the internet, Novell NetWare was the going protocol stack. Apple had its own called AppleTalk. Since the onset of the internet, TCP/IP was the protocol suite used. Now, TCP/IP is the name of the suite. TCP is one of the protocols in it, and IP is another of the protocols in it. So they are the most prominent of the protocols in the suite. But remember that TCP/IP is not a protocol. TCP/IP is a suite or a stack of protocols. Now, because it's used on the internet, most private companies, private networks also use the same protocol suite for their own inter-network communication, or I should say intra-network communication. They use the same protocol sets. This is one very, very important point. Several protocols are in use at the same time during a communication session. So again, think of writing a letter. I'm using a lot of protocols at the same time. I'm using one protocol having to do with the language, right? I'm writing in English. And then I'm using another protocol, a formatting protocol for the salutation, the valediction, the body, and so on. I'm using a certain grammar protocol, a certain spelling protocol. It might be different if I'm in England than I am in the United States, because they spell color C-O-L-O-U-R and I spell it C-O-L-O-R. So there are different spelling protocols. There is a pleasantry protocol, please and thank you and dear and so on. And all these protocols are occurring at the same time. So when you think of a protocol in use in data networking, it's common to say, well, I'm using the HTTP protocol, and then as we look at another layer, you say, well, I'm using the TCP protocol. Well, which one am I using? Well, you're using both of them. They occur at the same time. So that's an important point to remember, that this is kind of a conglomerate of protocols all being used and mixed up interchangeably, but certain protocols occur at certain layers of the OSI model. Other protocols don't really fit into the model very well. And that's another point here, is to think that the OSI model itself is independent of the protocol that's being used. So for example, the Novell NetWare protocol can fit into the OSI model. The TCP/IP protocol suite can fit into the OSI model. So the model is not the same as the protocol. They're independent of each other. So that's it for the TCP/IP protocols.